Hello, everyone. My name's Joseph. Thank you all for coming. It's Tokenomics 101. It's going to be more so fireside, I think, which is going to get devolved into a sort of workshop, let's hope. We got a very diverse group of people for this panel. I'm very glad to introduce. We're all going to go introducing ourselves. We have Adam, who is a BD. We have Grace, who manages the DAO, a project side and a VC side. So I think the perspectives we're going to be bringing on tokenomics are going to be as diverse as they can get. So to start, like they asked for icebreakers. I like the guilty pleasure one, but let's put a spin to it. I guess what's your guilty pleasure in blockchain? So I'm Josef Je. I run the Block Builders VC, and my guilty pleasure is DeFi Llama and looking at TVLs all day. Just across blockchains. I can't help myself. So Adam, please.
Hey guys, I'm Adam. DeFi/Web3 guilty pleasure. Interesting question. I'm on OpenSea a lot, being like, oh, hypothetically, if I bought this, then collateralized it with something like PWN. It's always like playing out how these things would work out. I guess thinking through the trading strategies with NFTs would probably be the guilty pleasure.
I'm Grace. My guilty pleasure for the last few years has been apocalypse porn. And when watching Klaus talk about central bank digital currencies, the end of the world, how the banks are all gonna steal our money. So yeah, apocalypse porn is definitely my guilty pleasure.
Sounds like you had a lot of fun lately with FTX and all this stuff. I'm Joseph from Pawn, and yeah, real interesting question. I guess I don't watch CoinGecko and CoinMarketCap anymore that often, and I guess the crypto parties. I actually enjoy coming to conferences more for the parties. I'm not saying the conferences are bad, but then there's this extra incentive of actually being able to hang out in the evening and not having to plan anything because everything just happens on its own. So that's my guilty pleasure.
All right. So bullish on Pawn, lending protocol that doesn't look at CoinMarketCap. It says something about that foundry, huh?
I mean, after a few years, you just get tired of it. So it's obviously not just me building the stuff, but if you've done it for 5 years, then you kind of you pass the point where you feel addicted, where you watch it every night. So it's part of the hygiene.
I guess it gets numbing at times.
By the way, just for whoever doesn't know, this is from the company that was giving out swag that was little marijuana things at ETH Prague. So
I was CBD.
yeah.
Even more bullish. So to start off, we want to touch upon what does the underlying value of tokens mean? What does it mean for every one of us and every one of our perspectives? As I said, we all look at tokens from a different standpoint and viewpoint. And we're kind of shifting paradigms between what is fiat and what we think of currency today and what the mechanisms behind tokens will be and devolve to be tomorrow. So I'd love Grace to go ahead and give her opinion because she's always the one that brings in the wisdom to our millennialism here.
No pressure.
Yeah.
So the question was about how we see different tokenomics models. Do you want me to just
the underlying value behind tokens and how you see them personally.
Yeah, so here we're in Israel, so I think about water. Underlying value, we've created a lot of financialization, but I always think about things in terms of the fundamentals, is there actually productive value? And we're talking a lot about public goods. I think there's tokenomics for public goods coming up over there after this. But is this actually something we're going to use? Is it water? Is it food? Do we have electricity? I worry very much. If I look at, some projects that I'll be talking about today are things like, if you look at Filecoin, storage, Hollow, those are actual goods that we need. Kongland, those are chips that they actually make chipsets. Or Tommy.com, which makes an alternative internet, which is a privacy preserving internet. And then we've got the public goods with Giveth. These have underlying value because they're actual utilities that we would use, and not because you can make a killing on them, but you could be dead without them.
So I guess where we could drill down here is what is the niche utility versus a generalized utility, right? Right now, people are betting from the financial standpoint. Me as a VC, I look at layer ones because they accrue the most value because they serve the underlying need of smart contracts across chains. I don't know how you look at it, Adam, in regards to value.
It's a great question. So the question really is like, what is value, right? Something like Bitcoin only gets its value because people are willing to accept it for a certain good. But it's a really good point to bring up that the value of a token, you could look at it as like, database, index data with Graph, or data storage with Filecoin, which is a really good way to look at it. We could also look at it the same utility of underlying support for smart contracts. But it's really, I think what we're really doing with blockchain and Web3 overall is kind of abstracting what value is as well. So this idea of what is value is kind of the forefront of everything we're thinking. And the utility obviously is super important. To think on that point, I think we need to worry about kind of providing this abstract value that's not too abstract. So we have tons of platforms that are creating value, which doesn't actually create value, and they're only traded because they're speculative. These questions are super important. Whenever we receive a token, we think, what is that underlying value? Is that token index data on Graph or Filecoin storage, or hypothetically Helium where it's Wi-Fi, whatever it is? It's super important that we're realizing fundamentally, why does this token exist? Why am I using it? Why am I purchasing it? What can I do with it? Because that's everything value is. And we're going to drill down more on how that's implemented across different protocols. And we really need to be focusing on that as the crux of everything we're really building and doing.
So, thanks. I would like to ask Joseph as well, because from a VC standpoint, right, we look at futures. All I do is speculate, literally all day and long, looking at TVLs and trying to think of what value it's going to be in the future. But we are in blockchain today, right? And we need to understand if there is a utility to any given token today. I think the best perspective is from a founder that is working on the trenches from the project side of how do you see tokenized value?
Well, as it was said like multiple times, like I still believe like we are kind of like early in the industry as such. So like what we see now isn't really like based off like providing kind of the water type of value. Like everything is like more or less is like still a game, and like all of the valuations that you're seeing of the various protocols, I mean, like I guess you see it yourself as a VC, because this is a future potential that people are like valuating right now, right? This is nowhere comparable to like multiplying like revenue of a protocol or like a L1 and saying, well, hey, this is a good base for setting like how much this thing or like how this thing could be valuable to the market. So I think there will be some time for us to like get to a point where like the valuation mechanisms, or just like being able to tell like what's good and what's just like purely speculative, what's a part of, what's a part of a Ponzi game where people just like ape in it and like believe there's value even when there's none, or when the value is just based on like few very vague premises. Yeah, I mean, like today it's still pretty subjective, and there's like some tools that are trying to improve it, and obviously there are categories of stuff, right? Like we can look at like fungible tokens, we can look at like protocol tokens like DAOs and so on, and probably you will look for different metrics there, versus like looking at NFTs and like collectibles and such. I guess like the tooling is being like worked on by many other groups and projects in the ecosystem. It's like to me, the fair point of what we are doing still is fairly subjective, and it's even why we built like a peer-to-peer protocol as first, because like who are we to tell you like how much something is worth? Like it's
I like that.
It's literally like up to the different communities that see the value, that can evaluate it, that can see the utility. Like crypto has grown so much in terms of width that I'm not able to tell you like what's the value proposition of like XYZ protocol, because like it's out of my reach. Like I wouldn't be able to do it, but it doesn't mean there is none. It just means there is like a certain community of people that can actually make these bets.
Yeah. I guess like the word abstraction and subjectivity doesn't help builders at all when it comes to assigning value. But we can divide it into two things. I think one is the artificial way, how we value tokens that aren't yet in market on a private basis, which is a VC trying to negotiate a valuation versus a project setting the pace, let's say, of how they see their project growing and how they see themselves as valuable. But this is only a segue, and that's what we're going to touch upon next, to the real organic value. Very few, if not maybe one, Bitcoin has seen value assigned by humanity. I think we speculate upon Ethereum and all its derivatives a lot more than what Bitcoin has given the world. People are starting to understand Bitcoin, but very few people understand smart contracts, right? And let's not say the rest of the derivatives. So as you said, I agree that it's very abstract, very subjective yet. But that brings us to the next question, right? This is tokenomics. So I see tokenomics and cap tables all day long. They're all wildly different depending on the niche, whether it's DeFi, whether it's gaming, whether it's a tokenless project. Everyone divides their cap differently. So what makes it sustainable? How do we reach sustainability? We'd love to touch upon a few failures and successes that we've seen in our careers. So please start with Mr. Finance Boy.
BMBJ. It's a really good question. The most sustainable projects that we've seen are almost all DeFi related, and it also touches on the points that we're discussing, saying these tokens are very abstract in their value, and not many people know what a smart contract is. But the truth is that anyone who uses the platform should understand its value inherently. It shouldn't be speculative, and if it's a good, sustainable, long-term project, the end user who it's built for is going to understand its value. So I think if you look at something like a DEX, you can look at something like Curve that distributes the fees, or something like PancakeSwap or Sushi that buy back the token in order to increase value. It takes the revenue from the protocol and it redistributes it to the token holders, whether that be through a way they redeem it like Curve, or whether a token appreciation like Sushi or PancakeSwap, or what DYDX is doing is kind of the value capture. But there's so many ways to take a really usable, strong product and then distribute that value back to the users, and that's really what we're all trying to build. So when we say things are abstract, they really shouldn't be. And if your project is incredibly abstract in its token and the value isn't inherent, I would have a tough time saying that's long-term sustainable. If I can see where the revenue is coming from, and I can see it's token trading fees, or it's an APY on loans people are taking, but the people are actually taking those loans, and it's not some random 200% APY that's crazy dynamic, that's not sustainable. But you need to see where the value is coming from. You need to ensure that the way the tokenomics are set up is it's clear for the user, and if the project isn't usable and we're speculating on its actual value, it's going to have a tough time being sustainable. So sustainability is all in where's that revenue coming from, i.e. where's that value to the users, and then in addition, can it sustain that value? Is it a strong revenue stream?
All right.
Yeah, so that's revenue as profit sharing and sustainability as a profit share. But if your interest is something else, it can look very different. So Holochain and Filecoin are really interesting to contrast because we saw SIA and Storage and Filecoin all doing limited issuance, and that it's a completely different model than what Holochain did, which is they have something that's called a mutual credit model, which means actually what they did is take a loan from the users, which they're going to pay back as the network takes fees for storage. They still haven't put out the network in beta version yet, but it's a completely different model. And it's not based on the token going up. It's based on one token being worth a certain amount of computing power. And so for them, sustainability is that the network itself grows and that each token is still worth, it's a stable coin in some ways based on computing power. And that's about the growth of the network. And similarly, we're seeing a similar thing with TommyNet, which is really interesting. That's a completely different model. They issue tokens every day. So they don't have limited issuance. They actually have increased issuance. And they're trying to create an alternative internet. And you have to use the tokens to buy your URL, which is also the same. Like it's a URL plus your wallet address plus your name, similar to ENS with a URL. And also to run the DAO and to keep running the system. And so the token, although it does seem to be going up, and all of the companies I talked to them, and they all helped bring me here. Just to let you know, they didn't sponsor me in that way, but once I decided who I was talking about, I talked to them. So what happened with Tommy is they have a daily issuance which is connected to their coin, and the idea is that if they're the internet, we're always going to have users coming, and then we should always have daily issuance. Now I think it would be smarter to say as new users join, we issue according to new users. And I didn't know this was going to happen, but this week actually somebody put in a new proposal on their DAO, and now they're having a big debate about, can we change the tokenomics based on the DAO? And if we don't, then it's not a democracy. And if we do, then it's not what says in the white paper. And don't do that, okay? Don't let your tokenomics change in the first year. That's a mistake. And then with Giveth, also their sustainability, I'll talk about a river again, which is they have this idea that if you want to invest in public goods, there's a bonding curve and it's staked. And the idea is that eventually that water will be worth something. So right now it's a donation to a river, but over time, the cleanliness of that river as a public good may end up flipping how the economic system works. And it may be that it doesn't pay to pollute a river, it pays to have a clean river in the future. So they have a very different idea of how the future of finance might look. And they told me about another mistake they made in their tokenomics was instead of vesting, they decided to do this thing. He called it something else, but it's actually vesting, but it's like saying, instead of saying you get 1,000 tokens and you get them every month, he says you get your 100 tokens, and as long as you hold them, you get more of them. He said it was he couldn't explain it to people. Don't try to do something too revolutionary that people haven't heard of. Just say vesting. It's the same mechanism, but like on its head. So don't get too creative. He said that was like just impossible to explain afterwards.
I guess I can agree that being minimalistic and trying to simplify the value prop of your project goes a long way for end users. From a VC standpoint, when I meet projects that tell me that I ask, first things I ask is to see the tokenomics. And they tell me, we have tokenomics, but they're not final yet. First red flag. It's like, what are you doing, bro? If it's a DeFi project, I want to see an idea of how these incentives are going to be given to community and to holders. If it's a gaming project, I want to see how you're going to create frameworks for this gaming studios or games or game aggregators. But then projects go and tell me, it's like, we can change it whenever you want. It's like biggest red flag ever, I think from the first thing from a project standpoint that you should do is understand who are the main stakeholders of your project. And I think what Grace mentioned versus regarding public goods is a good segue because what are public goods and what are private goods? There's two main paradigms that we need to cover, and what it is public good, which is what Grace is doing. It's a DAO that it's looking more of at the betterment of humanity versus what us degens want, which is to just see the zeros roll, do the X's. So a private good would be considered, I guess, a for-profit project, and a public good would be considered a more of a community-based endeavor of any kind. It could be a DAO, it could still be a project, but the tokenomics themselves, they have to reflect that. So I guess I'd ask the panel, maybe let's start with Joseph, how best you can reflect that from a private perspective.
Well, now, to be honest, I kind of got lost in the question then.
Public goods versus private goods in regards to tokens.
Yeah, I guess like to follow up on the previous point as well, I just wanted to mention it, like even if we say like the word tokenomics is obviously important to distinguish between the types of projects. So it's also like way too early to say like, to call the winners. I mean, like with, for instance, like even, take something like Bitcoin, like now after like 12 years, like I'm the least convinced about like Bitcoin being the right model that I ever was. We'll see for many of these things. Well, also like we are still part of this like generational Ponzi scheme, right? So I mean, like if you just look at the, like value and like how value like increases versus decreases, just like if you have higher demand than what you can satisfy, then well probably there's a good traction in value. And I guess for the nonprofits, there have been attempts to like commercialize public goods, right? And it's like still ongoing. And I think there is, the cost. It's a right cost. And I mean, I'd love to see many of these projects work. But there's always a question, and I don't want to segue into the general like topic of like DAOs and like participating in these systems. I don't actually know of a project that we could say, well, this has clearly worked. This obviously is the right way. There are certain like time frames where things tend to work. Like I don't know, if you look at Gitcoin, there was a lot of value created. I guess there was like a lot of projects that got I don't want to say rich, but like covered from perspective of like being able to work on those public goods and on the stuff that they wanted to. Now even without like external sponsors, like even just through the fact that they were participating in Gitcoin, eventually got an airdrop, were able to monetize that or like sell it and be able to like work on the thing they wanted to. But does that mean that's a figure out model and like we can count on that being like the thing to do for the future? Well, likely not. Well, we'll have to figure out something else. In terms of like the I guess like the private parts, like my opinion is that we're, like crypto isn't as punk as it used to be. Like I guess like we're now looking for less experiments and more like
legitimacy.
I guess legitimacy and like actual like revenue being generated and actual like I guess like business traction and like showing you can sell something and you can like generate revenue based on like some value proposition of your protocol or project. So on that side, I think like things are a bit more clear because like it's easy to count revenue. It's like easy to show traction. It's like easy to show that like whatever you've created can actually accumulate value, which can be distributed. And then, well, obviously from that, it's like much easier to say like something has value or not.
Yeah, me from a VC standpoint, once more, I might be biased, right? And there's definitely a little bit of back pumping in regards to what I invest on. But I think you can see the case for OpenAI, for example. They started out as a public good, as a community-based project. Oh my God, this is too powerful for one person to have it. Soon as they realized what they had in hand, they were like, oh crap, there's a lot of money to be made here. But the counter argument is that there's no adoption without economic incentive of all the stakeholders involved. Me as a VC, I hold a big stake in the projects we invest on. So I have a huge incentive to work behind these projects, to pump my bags, So these incentives are actually good for the ecosystem because they push even projects that can be considered public goods forward to decentralize more or to find a way to profitability, either or. I think it works in favor of projects to see themselves as, even if they're a DAO, for example, that is trying to do good in the world, to see themselves as trying to find value through revenue generation. I don't know what you think about that, especially that you're running a DAO, Grace. Do you think you need to maximize value for the stakeholders?
So first of all, I don't even like to use the word value when you're talking about money. Let's just be real. Okay, so like let's talk about the real thing, because I really value air, like my number one thing. And if I don't have it, like really like a few minutes without it, I'm not myself. And And money is fundamentally anti-air. That's just an externality, right? And so I don't use the word value when I talk about money. It's money. So some of it has to do with how long in the future you're talking about. Fundamentally, if we don't do something urgently about the quality of our air and our water, none of this is sustainable. So you're like, I'm looking at the sustainability of something. Well, I think you do have to look at the fundamentals. And do you have to have enough revenue? To me, if you think about living systems, right, there is no profit and there is no surplus. Anything we have surplus, that's either cancer or fat. And you really have to think about it. And if you look at our society, we have garbage dumps everywhere. That's fat, right? That's cancer all over the earth. And it's causing other illnesses like orange hair. I think you guys have orange hair here for like a week every year. There's not even a word for it anymore. It's not a khamsin. It's some other air pollution thing. And nobody knows what it is. And that's like, I've got a cancer and like now my breathing isn't very good, right? So I think the right way to think about profitability if you're doing public goods is, oh, we've got some extra revenue. Can we save the next river over? Or, oh, we've got a community that functions and feeds itself. Can we grow our community to help, for more people who feed themselves? And, it sounds all airy-fairy and utopian, but the other alternative isn't very sustainable. And I think we need to have a really good balance of both that financial day-to-day, and each of us also individually. Like I've written more than 100 white papers because I need that financial sustainability. Running the priceless DAO, it's called priceless. We don't worry about that because we have income from other places. And I think we all have to strike that balance. And it's very different for everybody. We have different goals in life. And I don't make any judgment about what other people want to do in terms of that. But to me, sustainability is about the next generation.
I think it's a great premise to speak upon because what we consider, especially our generation, right? We think of value as as numbers in a balance sheet that should and must go up. Whereas value itself can be derived other ways. And I think what token fungibility allows is for us to play really, we have a Play-Doh set